It was the day of my sister's wedding when all of this began. My mother kept worrying because there was no bouquet. I have no idea why she was so bothered. Weddings don't actually need bouquets. But she was probably worried about everything because it was such a big day for her daughter. My mother kept fretting over the lack of bouquet, and my father wanted this to be a pleasant and memorable day for his wife and my sister. An old grave had a bundle of flowers on it. The grave seemed rather neglected aside from the bouquet that was placed on top of it. The stone was so old that you could not read the inscription, which had eroded away, and moss had overtaken much of the tombstone. Without a second thought, my father scooped up the flowers of the grave and gave them to my sister. She smiled, taking the flowers. He turned his head to my mother. "Is everything all right now?" Mother said nothing, still looking very nervous and uneasy. The entire wedding went very well, until the bouquet was thrown. It was caught by my old babysitter, who was now a good friend of my mother's. That night, Mom and Dad went to the cinema to watch some movie which was rated 18+. This meant I had to stay home. My parents are very strict. They didn't call the babysitter for me, but for my younger brother, whom they didn't trust me enough to look after. The babysitter arrived, but she seemed frightened. I wondered what was wrong, but I didn't bring it up. She was the one who caught the bouquet at my sister's wedding. I heard a crashing sound coming from the living room. I came down from my room and found shattered glass littered on the floor. The window had been smashed in, and someone was standing in the living room. My heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, I found my hands racing towards my phone and calling 999. For those who don't know, that's the number for the police in the UK. All I told them was my address and that someone had broken in, and then I hung up. Then I got a better sight of who was standing in the living room. The woman turned her head, a pale white figure with a face that seemed almost cracked. She wore gardener's gloves and an old torn dress and held a pitchfork. I knew that when I saw her. She had come from beyond the grave. My mind raced. She ignored me and slowly stepped towards my babysitter, who screamed in fear. She jumped up off the sofa and stood paralyzed. It was like the gardener wanted revenge. After a couple of moments, I realized that since my babysitter received the bouquet from a grave, it seemed that the spirit had returned to get its flower back. It attacked just as the doorbell began to ring, and several knocks were at the door. "Hello, it's the police." I shrieked to alert the police, and suddenly they began to knock down the door. It took a while, but when they came in, the creature turned and smiled. I was quite young back when we were fooling around with my dad's old CB radio system. If I recall correctly, I was 16 when I pulled it down from the attic in the house, and found myself asking about it at the dinner table that night. He explained what it was. I could communicate on shortwave radio around the area. He offered to set it up and show me how it worked. Now, this was the age before the internet, so my friend Tom and I were fairly excited to be using it. The unit sat in my bedroom for a few months, and we had fun trying to talk to the truckers out on the highway or the various farmers or herders nearby. Many just ignored us or jumped frequency. We'd jump through them all and speak to anybody who would answer. On channel 29, we began talking with somebody who seemed to be around our age. He said his name was Bobby. We hardly got further than cracking jokes and talking about playing pranks and giving fake traffic reports at first. It was all pretty exciting, but eventually, after a month or so, we agreed to meet up with Bobby. We asked for an address and he told us he lived on a farm just off Harris Road, around 15 or 16 miles out of town. So Tom took his parents' car one overcast Saturday afternoon and, as the rain broke out, we made our way down the highway and pulled off where we'd heard Harris Road was. Nearing a split country road, we spied the name of the farm on an old wooden sign that Bobby had told us about over the radio. We pulled up through the drive and took the car right up to the farmhouse, expecting to see him waiting for us. Instead, we were faced with a rundown, dilapidated farmhouse, towered over by what appeared to be a barn falling over its struts. Common sense should have told us to leave, but despite initial confusion, we were convinced that Bobby merely hung out here, that he had found the old radio system in the barn, where he usually told us he was when he talked to us. We got out of the car and crunched across the old stone pathway to the barn, pushing the huge doors open with a deafening creak. We called out Bobby's name, heard nothing, and debated looking further. Eventually, we decided to head in, Tom leading the way. Upon rounding the first corner, we found the old radio system sitting up on an old workbench, still online, and the receiver still cracking away with the static, but it was the rotten human bones, laying across the workbench, that made us run. Near my house there's a dense forest, and in the middle of the forest, a cell phone tower stands tall among the trees, rising higher than any other structure. Now, a cell phone tower is nothing extraordinary in 2015, but the legend that surrounds ours is unsettling at best. Because of the tower's location within the forest, it is rather inaccessible to most people. Even those who service the thing have a hard time getting to it with all their equipment. Nevertheless, it has been effectively dubbed the Tower of Death by our town. The tower was state-of-the-art for when it was built, and replaced an older tower, which was smaller and nearing the end of its life cycle. As the legend goes, just 2 days after the tower was built, a young couple who obviously were under the influence climbed to the top of the tower in hopes of taking a picture of the sunset as it descended over the town. As they reached the antenna cluster at the top, the girl was suddenly snagged on a cable and lost her footing, causing her to fall to the ground. She was killed upon impact. The male, devastated, also flung himself off, but instead of dying instantly, like his lover, he survived just long enough to drown in his own blood. They died in agony and panic, never having even said their last words. Ever since, the tower refused to operate normally, and was sometimes inexplicably cut out when the sun is setting. People have reported hearing faint sounds that resembled screams when calling on their phones, and would even get texts from unknown numbers with the words, "Help," and "Please help us." The various carriers which the tower served were soon notified of the strange occurrences, and went to investigate. When they opened up the transceiver at the base of the antenna, they hastily replaced a lot of servers, switches, and other equipment that control the tower. One of the technicians claimed that they had found droplets of fresh blood on the electronics, which were sealed inside a solid steel enclosure that was completely watertight. This all happened well after the death of the couple, and the structure and surrounding area was well cleaned from top to bottom long ago. Many assumed that maybe an animal had been killed near the antenna, or that the technician was making this whole thing up for attention, but others suspected something a bit more disturbing. Despite the best efforts of the ISP, the tower would not operate reliably. I personally never believed in any of that, but what happened yesterday made me become a bit more open-minded about the whole thing. I was taking a walk, enjoying the beautiful sunset one last time before winter sets in, when I looked up at the supposed Tower of Death, and that was when I saw the silhouette of a person, barely visible, hanging from one of the horizontal bars on the antenna cluster. The person was clearly struggling, and his or her grip was failing. I watched in horror as the person fell from the structure, probably hundreds of feet to the ground. Panicking, I called 911 and ran toward the tower, but deep down knowing that whoever it was probably was long dead. It took me almost half an hour to arrive at the base of the enormous structure, and when I arrived, the entire scene was spotless. There was nobody to be found, no blood, no evidence that anyone has been here in ages. The emergency services arrived just minutes later, and all they found was me, frozen in shock. I tried to explain to them what I saw, but they likely thought I was either drunk or crazy, or probably both. They walked around the tower once, found nothing, and left. That night, I was beginning to relax and assume that it was probably just an optical illusion when I received a text from an unknown number. All it said was one word: help.